Hello, hello. I'm Successful Geek, and here's another video for you to check out. Decided to finally make a video, and I really wanted to do a board game review video, but something's been on my mind just because I've been seeing it happening a lot, and I wanted to talk about some Kickstarter marketing changes. So I actually make a little presentation here because I use a software called MindMeister to jot down ideas as I have them, so that way I don't forget. And it's kind of my stream of consciousness that I put into there, but then I'll arrange it a little bit. And so this is just going to help me keep on track. So I'm actually going to share my screen here, and there we go. So let's go ahead and get started. So you may have noticed that a lot of Kickstarters, how they're run, they're changing. They're becoming shorter, and sometimes they're not raising as much money, or other times they are. There's a wide variety in how the Kickstarters are run, and that's just because I think we're kind of in the golden age of board games. Like, there's so many amazing games coming out all the time. And so because of that, there's no longer a good time to launch. There's just so many amazing games out there that are launching at all times. There's no longer to not compete with anyone, I'm going to launch on this month or this month. So board game companies are going to have to adapt for that. So because of that, the new normal may be shorter campaigns. Even though I'm personally not a fan, I actually like longer campaigns, at least a minimum of 15 days. But there's tons of companies out there launching 7-day, 9-day campaigns, and they're seeing success. My personal reason why I like to see it at least 15 days is that way you can go through a pay period and stuff to allow for budgeting for a campaign. But it doesn't really matter if they do proper marketing up front before the Kickstarter launches. So if they give plenty of advance notice to anyone who might be interested in their game at all, before the Kickstarter launches, people can budget for it. And especially as long as they're clear on, hey, this is going to be a short campaign. My challenge with recently run short campaigns that I've still backed because I'll stretch and budget for them because I'm a huge fan of them. But they didn't let people know up front that before they launched that, hey, this is going to be a really short campaign, so budget for it in advance type of thing. I think as we adapt as consumers, and also the board game companies adapt to these shorter campaign cycles, I think it'll actually become a lot easier. The downside to all this, and actually going back to there's no longer a good time to launch because there's so many amazing board games, a lot of newer companies have depended on Kickstarter for discoverability, just like a lot of video game streamers depended on Twitch to get found and stuff, or YouTube content creators. That's no longer the case. There's too many content creators out there. There's too many board game companies out there to really allow for any actual discovery without you doing some marketing yourself. So me as a marketer, I can't wait to see the board game companies actually start applying some marketing. And I don't blame them if they're not good at it at first. They're going to have to learn because they're game makers. They're not necessarily marketers. That's not their profession. They make games and they make amazing games. So because of that, there's going to be some growing pains, and some campaigns that you think might do really well aren't going to do anywhere near as good as what you might have thought. Meanwhile, other campaigns that you just never heard of because of how they marketed leading up to their campaign blow it out of the water. So we'll see how they adapt. Let me head down to the next one. Okay. How can board game companies adapt to get ahead of the wave that's very much coming? It's technically already here, but it'll be really interesting to see who adapts the fastest and what companies actually go forward with this the fastest. So let's see here. Start marketing your game early and build an interest list. So build an email list. Email lists are some of the most valuable things that you can build in your company because it's something you can take with you. I know everyone's building Facebook groups or Discord groups or different ways to build communities, and that's really good for the community part. But nothing is more valuable than the email, because if Facebook shuts your group down for whatever reason, or Discord shuts down, or there's an outage, an email list is something you can take with you. I actually teach this on a weekly basis for the software company I work with that helps people build email lists. But the reason the list is so valuable is, I really don't know why the list is so valuable, other than it's a built-in audience that you can always send updates to and sell your new products to without having to pay for advertising to them because you have that list. But anyways, I always use the example of when Facebook bought Instagram. Facebook had more than enough developers and talented developers to develop their own Instagram. they bought Instagram purely because of the user base. So, and that happens all the time, where it's either a technical acquisition because they want the talent, and usually if that's the case, the company's very small at that point, or it's we want to expand our user base. Hey, those people over there have a huge built-in user base. I'm going to go get them to follow me. So actually I need to go here, and then sorry, I'm testing out a whole bunch of new technology for me for broadcasting this, or recording this anyways. And so I'm still learning all the kinks and working out the kinks and stuff, because I wanted to use this to help keep it clear for me to stay on track. And also I think it looks kind of neat. But anyways, so plan for shorter campaigns, but make it clear up front that it's going to be shorter. So I don't know. I definitely don't know what the proper length is going to be. I think it'll probably end up being around 15 days. Cause again, it allows for that entire pay period to allow maybe someone to get a paycheck, before the end of your campaign, to allow more people to back. But again, it's less important for the length as long as you're marketing up front and you're building that hype up front. The days of 30+ day campaigns are over. Then that's actually can be a very good thing, because if you have too long of a campaign and people are like backing on day one because they see all the cool things that they get for being an early backer, but then canceling at the end because either, well, I finally talked myself out of it after 30+ days, or there's also, well, this other amazing Kickstarter launch, so I want to move my money over to that. And so there's a lot of things that can happen if you have a campaign that's too long and not well managed. I know there's definitely, I'm not a Kickstarter expert. There's companies that like have it dialed in, but I honestly believe at least for board games, I think it's going to change drastically with how it's going to happen. So you need to have a plan to keep your community engaged for the entire campaign. So both leading up to it, get people talking about it, get people in the comments, talking about it on Board Game Geek and any other sites that you can. But get people talking about it and keep them engaged, because that activity will actually draw more people in. It's the idea of social proof. It's like, hey, all these people think it's cool, so obviously it must be cool. So I'm going to go there as well. So find ways to keep the community engaged, whether it's, I have some ideas coming up for that. So here's some content ideas to both start building your list as well as to keep people engaged throughout the campaign. Game dev diaries. I've been starting to see this more and more, where the designer of the game is starting to publish like, hey, here's how I came up with the concept. Here's kind of some of the early works and early ideas that we had and how this worked. And maybe don't post it as updates, but designer diaries on Board Game Geek are fantastic. Have it as a third-party place, because that way you can leverage both that third-party location to draw people in, as well as it doesn't clutter up the things that are important to the Kickstarter campaign itself. So, but yeah, so like people are fascinated by the idea of the story of how stuff came about. I can't remember, there was a beer company a ways back that they were having a tough time marketing. They were a kind of a newer beer company, and a marketing agency came in. They started asking questions. So like, what makes you guys unique? And like, what's the process of you guys making your beer? And they walked him through the process and stuff and all the care that went into it. And the marketing team was like, why don't you share that story? Well, every beer maker does this. It doesn't matter. No one's talking about it. Turn it into the story and people will be fascinated. And sure enough, it actually catapulted them to some pretty good success. And then again, I'm sorry, I can't remember that off the top of my head. But those designer diaries, like giving people insight into the thought process of how stuff came about, it really connects people to the board game more, because then they're like, oh, I see how that developed. And maybe they can, like, obviously there's always going to be people who want to contribute to the ideas of the game stuff, but if they can see that some of those ideas have been done and tested before, then maybe they won't like try to harp on, well, this needs to be done. Well, we already did that. And here's exactly why it worked or that it didn't work. Video is fantastic for, creating games, or promoting games. YouTube discovery is not too bad as long as you get some people to follow you. But either start building your own YouTube channel. I think every publisher should do that anyways. or get featured on other channels. I think you should have your own YouTube channel anyways, but definitely get featured on other channels because the bigger channels will obviously help you get found a lot faster. And that can, again, start the conversation, drive them. But the thing is, have these videos done before the Kickstarter campaign launches. Because again, you want to build up the hype leading up to the Kickstarter. So that way you get that first day momentum really high. Polls that can keep the community involved. So for example, like, hey, what colors should we make these factions? Or what should we name this? Like, just any kind of thing that can be fun for the community to be involved, but at the same time, don't let people ruin your game either. So, because I have a thing over here, just remember not to fall into the community dev trap too much, because Ford actually talked about when he was talking about like, why did you make a car? Or like, how'd you come up with the idea for a car and stuff? And why didn't you ask more people about it? He said, well, if I asked them what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster carriage, or a better carriage, or something like that. I'm very much paraphrasing here, but that's, to me, like, that is very key to remember. Like, do the polls that are things you can adjust for fun. Don't do polls about core thing. Like, you are the game designer. You already know what you're doing way better than any of us. I appreciate you so much. So just keep that in mind. But at the same time, the polls keeping the community involved can be very, very valuable. And finally, pre-launch social stretch goals. I'm actually starting to see this on a couple campaigns where they're doing they're sharing the campaign page before it goes live. And on that campaign page, they'll have actually some pre-launch stretch goals where it says, hey, if we get this many followers across our social media, we'll unlock this before the game even goes live. If we get this to happen. So again, it's helping build that hype leading into the actual launch. So that's all I have for now. I appreciate you hanging out. I'd love to hear your feedback on my thoughts around this. It's just something I've been thinking about because I love marketing and I love board games, and I want to see more board game companies have success on Kickstarter, because I know that tons of them depend on that discoverability on Kickstarter, and I just don't think that's the case anymore. So it's just something to pay attention to. And even if you get the Kickstarter hype of being discovered on Kickstarter, this, I think, can actually be putting like fuel on the fire. So just some things to think about. I'm Successful Geek signing off. Thanks so much, and game on.